when Leia's identity is revealed, Jabba forces her into some odd form of sex slavery, which is never fully defined by the film. But there's been a lot of talk about whether or not this objectifies Leia. And it's a very iconic costume that, I mean, you see it all over Instagram. You see artists drawing her in this costume. You see cosplayers dressing in that costume. How do you feel about the slave Leia issue?
I'm going to walk a very fine line here. First of all, I knew that it was coming because Chris Hardwick, in his wonderful Halloween costume when he dressed up as Princess Leia in this costume a couple years ago.
I'm so glad I've never seen that.
A year ago or something.
Yeah.
Like, iconic. That's where I like first seen it, but then since I had seen it the first time, I saw it a lot more, so I knew it was coming. I don't necessarily agree with it, but with Jabba's character, I think that it fits that he would do something and make her dress that way in this film. So, like, I don't agree with it, but I can see how it came about and happened that way.
Yeah, definitely. Because Jabba's a pervert. That's what we're.
Yeah, basically.
we're saying. What about you, Daryl?
I mean, when I was a kid, I never thought anything of it. Like,
yeah,
you know, he had that green alien woman,
Twi'lek,
sure, who was his slave, and she died, so he needed a new one, and Leia was there. So I don't know. I just never thought anything of it when I was a kid.
Right.
Obviously, I'm not in agreement with slavery or
Right.
objectifying anybody.
Yeah.
It does seem to highlight what we've noticed before when we were talking about the prequels, which is kind of a lighthearted depiction of slavery within the Star Wars universe.
Right.
They don't really seem to be putting it out there as an evil thing,
Right.
commenting on how terrible slavery is.
Right.
They just sort of include it
Yep.
in their stories. From a story perspective, I do think it's cool because it sort of leads into her killing Jabba, which is a poetic thing because he gets killed by somebody who he's trying to enslave.
Yeah.
Like, he literally gets choked to death by somebody he's trying to choke, you know? So
Yeah.
I like that justice.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's, for me, it's very nuanced, and you'll hear why in a minute. And I think that it can definitely be misused. And so when I say that, I mean the way that we treat the slave Leia idea can be misused. So, first of all, from a story perspective, it is very clear that she does not want to be in that position or wearing that costume. So Jabba is 100% objectifying her. So inherently, the costume is associated with sex slavery. I don't think there's any way to get around that. That is what it is. She's being subject to that against her will. While she's wearing the costume, she does not give in to being a victim. And this is a key point because it relates to her character and what we can learn from her character. Because, like you referenced, she's the one that kills Jabba.
Mm-hmm.
And she's actually wearing that costume when she does it, right?
Yeah.
So this is where it gets nuanced. Because we know that she's been subject to wearing that costume against her will, and yet she becomes a hero in our eyes while she's wearing the costume by overcoming her predicament at that point in time. So I think, you know, as it relates to the slave Leia costumes and how we treat it, we have to tread pretty lightly because Jabba was objectifying her in that costume. So are we rooting for the woman who was taken against her will and fought her captivity to rescue herself, or are we just rooting to see Leia in a bikini? Right? Like, I think we have to think about that because Leia didn't want that.
Yeah.
That was not something that she wanted.
Right.
So I don't think we can necessarily glorify it. The intent of that costume is for it to be sexy. That is why Jabba has her in it.
Mm-hmm.
But let's be honest, it is not sexy if it's sex slavery.
Right.
Right? Like that's a
True.
problem. So I think if we're gonna talk about the sex slave Leia, I think we have to handle it in that way. So if we're like, for example, let's just say that I'm an artist, I'm gonna go draw Leia in that costume. Am I objectifying her because I want to just see Leia in the bikini? Or am I actually trying to say this is a moment where she was put in a situation where she had to overcome hardship, and this is what she does. She ends up overcoming it, and not becoming a victim. I mean, that's a pretty dicey line to go. I mean, even when you see people in their cosplay and they're wearing this costume, it's like, are you trying to say that her being a sex slave is a good thing? Or is there some sort of aspect to your costume where this is post her rescuing herself? I don't know. It's a hard one. And I'm not trying to throw shade at anybody who's worn that costume or loves that costume. I'm not trying to do that. I'm just trying to say, when we look at that, how do we look at sex slavery, and how do we look at specifically Princess Leia and the position that she's put in, and how she feels about it, not necessarily how we feel about it.
Yeah, and it's almost like you need to talk more about not Jabba putting Leia in this outfit, but George Lucas putting Carrie Fisher in this outfit. Because, and I mean, not to discount anything you're saying. Obviously, it's all terrible, of course, but Jabba's not human. We don't know that Jabba's urges and Jabba's behavior is in alignment with a human. We don't know that that's why he put her in that outfit. You know.
Sure.
But George Lucas wrote a movie. He licks her at one point, doesn't he?
He totally does.
Yeah.
And he licks his lips, and he's like,
yeah,
it's so gross.
So I'm not saying that that's not the case, and obviously it's terrible.
Yeah.
But I feel like you have to look behind it a little bit too, and you have to look at George Lucas putting Carrie Fisher in that outfit.
Right.
And obviously that's not slavery. That's that's selling your movie and stuff like that.
Right.
But what was he thinking when he wrote the story?
Yeah.
Was it slavery in his mind?
Right.
Was he not even thinking that deep? Like, I just don't even know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you look at the character of Leia, though, I mean, she is very upset by it.
Yeah.
So if, as a writer, I write the character to be upset, I'm assuming that I'm writing that scene to be upsetting to the audience as well.
Yeah.
In other words, and this is where movies get really, really dicey. I mean, the film with what's the film that was like the M. Night Shyamalan film with all the personalities? Split. That film, I remember watching that film, and I remember thinking at one point in time when, after this is early on in the film, after he captures the girls, and I don't know what happened. I don't know, does he change them out of their clothes or whatever? But they're all in the room in their underwear.
Yeah.
Okay. And I remember distinctly thinking, like, whoa, fine line here. Because as an audience member, you want the audience to feel that these young women, girls really, are vulnerable. But at the same time, you do not want to put the audience in a position where they somehow are asked to think inappropriately about this as well.
Yeah.
And that's tough from a filmmaking perspective and from a writing perspective, because what you don't want the audience to do is turn the situation into you want them to force them to consider what is appropriate in this situation and why do I feel like this is not good. But you also don't want to be so graphic about it that it suddenly, like, for example, I'll give you a perfect example to kind of go along with this one. HBO will tell its showmakers, you need to put more nudity in this movie. They don't say that because they want to show disturbing, vulnerable people. I mean, I know that some of the writers may say that, but what HBO wants is more eyes on their films because they want people who want to see that.
Yeah.
I think that that's a very difficult position to be put in as a filmmaker, because now you're saying, well, what am I trying to engage in my audience's mind? Am I trying to engage a vice that they might have?
Yeah.
And I think you want to avoid engaging the vices. That's not fair to your audience. But what you do want to do is be able to show, and I think that that's what George does in this film. I think that he thinks I'm going to put Leia in a position of as being a sex slave, but I'm going to have her rise out of that. By the way, she wasn't rescued by anybody.
Right.
She literally rescues herself.
Yeah.
So I think that he wasn't, I'm giving him the credit for saying, like, I don't, even though we might as an audience feel like that, oh, Carrie Fisher's really attractive and she looks really great in this outfit, we're not meant to think that.
Yeah.
We're meant to think, oh, this is really disturbing and unfortunate that this is happening.
Although there is the heroic shot after she saves herself where Luke grabs her and swings from one ship to the other.
Yeah, there's
So,
that.
You know, it's not like anybody throws a blanket over her and then saves her.
Ooh, that's a really good point.
You know what I mean?
Let's call George Lucas right now. No.